stars and stripes in my soul. Steel toes on, boots in the gravel, heartland truth on every channel. Open Bible, flag on the wall. We say what we believe when we don't talk at all. This is red, white, and raise hell. Cowboy hat, church bell, can't scare us into silence. We were born to rebel from the back road to the beltway. We won't fade, we won't fail. Proud, loud, standing tall. Red, white, and raise hell. We back the bad, we guard the border. We love our guns and law and order. They try to shame every word we say, but we don't bow down, we just press play. This is red, white, and raise hell. Cowboy hat, church bell, can't scare us into silence. We were born to rebel from the back road to the bell. Hey, we won't fade, we won't fail. Proud, loud, standing tall. Red, white, and raise hell. You can cancel the show, but not the crowd. We're still here, still talking loud. Hand of the free on every spell. Hit that mic, host, let the truth ring out. This is red, white, and raised hell. Cowboy hat, church bell, can't scare us into silence. We were born to rail from the back road to the beltway. We won't fade, we won't fail. Proud, loud, standing tall. Red, white, and raised hell.
Whoops. All right, everybody. Good morning. Good morning. Thank you so much for being with us. We are indeed, strictly speaking, on a Monday, the 13th morning of the 7th month in the year of our Lord 2026. I've spent the last few minutes assembling a fantastic green room full of panelists and conservative stalwarts. And this is the one thing that I want you to realize that today's show is based on. It's about finding some common ground among people who agree on probably 99% of things in our country today. I know, because I agree with all of them on 99% of things. I just don't know where I am on data centers. And I've heard from so many people saying the exact same thing. I hear positive things about data centers and the need to move forward from conservatives. Then I hear, whoa, hold on a second. We can't do this from conservatives. What do? I figured we need to get as many of them in a room together as we can. And this is the way that we're going to do it. Let me give you just a little bit of a backgrounder on where we are and why we are about to welcome these 7 guests into this conversation. Watch.
Increasingly, people across the country are protesting against proposed AI data centers, concerned that the centers will drain resources and strain power grids and cause noise and pollution.
But a plan to build the largest AI data center in the world in southern Ohio is being welcomed by many with open arms there. Local 12's chief investigative reporter Dwayne Pullman reveals why the data center is being embraced in Pike County and how this plan could provide a blueprint for the future.
Port's Technology Campus, where the future begins and the American people win.
In March, Trump cabinet members and a long list of elected leaders gathered in a poor Appalachian pocket of southern Ohio to unveil a bold plan for America.
Some of us believe we have to have caution that must be enforced, as this unknown entity may represent the greatest threat for individual freedom ever conceived.
We wanted to raise our kids in the country, a nice, quiet setting, and that's all kind of being taken away from us now.
For Ohio resident Brianne Kidd, the construction of Meta's 800-acre Bowling Green data center across from her country home could upend the lifestyle she spent years building for her family.
What it's taken away is our beautiful sunrise I saw every single morning. Now we see buildings and cranes, and that's the reason why we moved here, things like that. You know, to live in God's country and not Meta's country.
Ohio is giving almost $1.6 billion in sales tax breaks to data centers. That is way more than state tax officials predicted just a few short years ago.
It's a political issue, an environmental issue, and an economic issue. The state of Ohio trying to figure out the best way to handle the surge in data centers here.
Are you concerned about the proposed data center in Charlottesville, Ohio? Well, don't be. I have met with the developers personally. I went to their data center in Massillon, Ohio, to inspect that facility and talk to some of the citizens there about how that's gone for them. I've talked to the developers about the energy use. They're not going to use any of your energy. I've talked to them about water use. They're not going to use any of your water. I've talked to them about sound. They're going to make the sound from the turnpike even less, let alone from the data center.
And there you have it, just a little bit of a primer so you understand exactly what some of the complaints, some of the concerns, and some of the answers are from some of our panelists. And I want to welcome them all to our set right now. We're going to bring them in together. I will introduce them one by one, however. And you see on your screen a little bit out of the order that I had expected them to be, but that's okay. I was trying to group them by position on this issue here, but I've never had 7 people in this room before. The max we've had was 3. The last voice you saw in that little preview was the first person I will introduce. I've been talking to Tom Zawistowski about conservative issues in the state and in the country for years. He's the president of the We the People Convention and founder of Portage County Tea Party. Tom Z, good morning.
Good morning, Bob. Thanks for having us on. It's a great panel to be part of.
Thank you very much. Greg Lawson is a senior research fellow at the Buckeye Institute. He joins Tom in supporting the expansion of data centers in the state of Ohio. Greg, good morning. How are you?
Doing wonderful. Thanks for having me on. This is obviously a very important topic.
It is indeed. Jeff Mihalik is, Jeff, I always say, is it Mihalik or Mihalich?
Mihalik.
Mihalik, good. That H there throws me sometimes. Founder of NowDigi, a Northeast Ohio AI and tech consultancy. He is also going to join Tom and Greg on this side of things. Jeff, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us, Bob. Appreciate it.
Of course. On the other side of if we were in a debate room right now, the other side of the aisle, but they're all on the same side of the political aisle. But Marcell Strbich is a 20-year Air Force intelligence officer. You probably have gotten to know over the last couple of years as a candidate for the Secretary of State's position. Marcell, good morning.
Good morning. Great to be with you.
Stephanie Stock is the founder and the president of Ohio Advocates for Medical Freedom. She is also, and we are covering her up with a graphic.
Hi.
She is. And Stephanie has also written a lot of legislation to try to move through Ohio, and she is worried very much about the expansion of these data centers. Stephanie, good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
John Marra is the mayor of Timberlake, Ohio. He is very active on these issues. John, good morning. How are you, sir?
Good morning, sir. Very well, thank you.
And Eric Watson is a business owner, and he is a former candidate for the Ohio House of Representatives as well. Eric, good morning.
Good morning, Bob.
All right, folks, I hope you don't mind if I give first dibs here to Marcell Strbich on the opposition side of this, because Marcell has got family obligations. He can only stay with us until 7:30, so we're going to try to get him as much room as possible. And then we'll have more of a level playing field. It'll be 3-on-3. But I really, I don't want this to appear to be this kind of a thing, a 3-on. Like I said, we're all colleagues, and 99% of the time we'd be in a room together wearing red hats and telling everybody, how much we support making America great and America first and so forth. This is just a very divisive issue, as I laid out in the beginning by just gathering a few media clips and putting them together. This is a very, very divisive issue for everyone, conservative and otherwise. Marcell, as I said, I'm going to start with you. Tell me where you are with respect. What are your most grave concerns about the proliferation or the expansion of these data centers in the state of Ohio?
Well, there's no doubt that data centers support the digital economy. There's an argument to be made for economic development and jobs. They can come with infrastructure upgrades, which I have seen very little evidence thus far, even though that's something that a lot of the developers purport and the operators of these facilities that they will someday bring about, along with the innovation of how they're going to consume power and water. But what the fundamental issue that keeps me from being a proponent on this issue right now comes down to what is the benefit to the communities? And I think that's the premise that we have to build from, the human element, right? It's easy for any of us who don't live next to a data center to profess that it is a general good for society, when in reality, the people in those communities have to derive benefits. In other words, the data center has to be a blessing. It does not have to be a drain. And I think that the march of data centers, not in a sense, what they really are effectively is IT infrastructure, storage systems, networking equipment, power infrastructure, cooling systems. I think many people have come to accept that that component of data centers has been in society for a long time. What we're talking about is a far more scale, far more sizable construct. And the way it's hoisted on in Ohio, even since the advent of many of the agreements made by John Kasich, prior governor to the current governor, the tax exemptions, the credits, which was just discussed in your clip. Those are examples to me of the inability to derive value and benefit, or to guarantee that the employment, for example, comes out of the very communities on which these will be hoisted. So when it comes to that, that's just the core issue: the environment, human factors, the power structure, infrastructure, water, which I know my colleagues, all of you on the pro or opponent side, can discuss in terms of how that's going to work. But what I see is an imposition on communities who are very who lack the ability to be able to deal with this in some sense. Now, Clark County just did something quite forward-leaning. I was very surprised to see this week. Their county commissioners have actually tightened their zoning aspects. They didn't put a moratorium on it because counties are not in a position to moratorium any data centers. That requirement would fall more onto certain municipalities, authorities. But what it says is they want to be prepared for when these entities want to come and build in their community, and they want to designate where they can. So those that would advocate for them, let's be realistic. Do they need to be near schools, near homes? Not necessarily, but each and every locality. And I think Greg will talk really well to this because he understands how the government structure framing of Ohio works, in that it's very convoluted. It's very layered. Who has authority to say yes or no? And then you have the legislature, which Stephanie's going to talk about today, in terms of legislation that they tried to almost pass before they closed out their general session, and what that portended to. And Eric knows a lot about that and knows a lot about legislation that involves some of the applications that are going to be hoisted onto Ohio, particularly digital cryptocurrency, and kind of how that's been designated to usurp some local authority in terms of being able to deny any of this within the communities. So I think those are the issues that concern me, is the superimposition of these by interests that don't preside within the community, that maybe even don't preside within the state of Ohio. And now we have to think about this as to what are the derived benefits to the community. And that's why I stand in opposition today.
All right, Marcell, thank you very much for the opening salvo there. Like I said, I'm going to try to get you in one more time before you have to adjourn in about 10 minutes. I want to go to the other side of things, and Tom Z, I'm going to go to you first simply because I've known you the longest. You and I have had many, many discussions on many, many important issues. Let's get your quick, opening remarks about this. I mean, if you want to respond to Marcell, you can, or if you just kind of want to go with your own presentation here, Tom, but go ahead and take that from the top.
Yeah, first of all, I'm really glad to be in this conversation, and it's one that we have to have. And I have unbelievable respect for everybody that's on this. So let me just start with this premise. I'm coming at it from the Tea Party, individual citizens, point of view. And I agree with Marcell. The main thing to me is what's the benefit to the community? And so my starting position is I believe that we can build data centers that are safe and that do benefit the community. And I do think that it's a national security interest that we do that. And so I've tried to spend my time really listening to the people who are saying, what about this? What about that? And saying, what are the solutions to that? In other words, how do you not use millions of gallons of water and use a closed loop system that uses a lot less water? So I'm interested in solutions because I think overall net, this is really important to our nation, but it can be really important to these communities because the money issues are really significant, particularly in the case I'm most familiar with in Shalersville. And so my position is you got to make them safe. You've got to, make them benefit the community. And then if you can do that, it's got to be good for the United States and for Ohio. And if you can't do that, then I'm against them.
All right. Very well, Tom. Thank you. Tom Zawistowski. And again, I really don't want to overload Marcell here in the early going here, but he doesn't have much time here. So Marcell, just a quick response to Tom.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm glad that we agree in the premise of it. We got to derive our reasoning, a rationale for building and beneficial to the community. But look at the way the governance has worked in Ohio. We have over 224 of these thus far. Okay. That's according to CNBC, which came out with a study that we're number one in doing business. I wonder why we're number one in doing business. Maybe we've been very accommodative in a variety of ways to multinationals to come in and give them credits and exemptions. The other aspect is, people have to think about this long term. We are building an enterprise and an infrastructure. What does that mean for workers? What does that mean for future jobs and employment? We all acknowledge there's some form of displacement that comes about as industry innovates and seeks to ever create more productivity. That means potentially large unemployment down the road. And then consumption. What does that mean? So there's a lot of components to this that we can't quite place yet. What I would prefer is that communities are empowered to the extent that they're sovereign to make this choice, not for the state, definitely not for the federal government like they just did with this housing bill, which is going to thrust Section 8 housing into towns and other areas. We saw this with the Federal Communications Act of 1996. You can't even cite where they're going to put up a 5G tower right now next to my kid's school, next to my house. So I just see that, large industry interest, special interests, because they have a seat at the table in Columbus, seem to continually get the upper hand in each and every venture in the name of expanding the national security, the economic interests. And I know a thing or two about national security, and I haven't seen enough evidence yet, even for myself, to suggest that we have to overload communities with regards to this or unevenly develop these in rural areas. Because what you're noticing in Ohio is all of the major municipality counties from Cuyahoga to just recently Montgomery, where Dayton is, are saying no to this. So this is clearly going to become, if this continues at this pace, a rural development thing. And are we just sticking it on the rural communities whose economies are a lot more tenuous to bear the brunt of this? Because when you build this, you have to build oil and gas. Oil and gas leads to more oil well extraction, more opportunities to contaminate the water, which is a huge problem in Appalachia no one wants to talk about because there's very powerful people that sit on committees in the legislature. And because you need data centers and you need power, you're going to need to expand operations in the Marcellus and Utica Shale. And so all of this is going to compound on the people. And as you'll learn from Eric and you'll learn from Stephanie, those come with real consequences. And again, I'll go back to before, fully saying that we should, go the route of the citizen-led ballot initiative that's out there by Conservative Ohio. Things have to change very quickly. We have to pull the credit exemptions and these type of things from these companies. They can pay for it. They're multi-billion-dollar companies, and they need Ohio more than they need us. And frankly, I'm upset that the politicians in this state didn't think in the interests of the people. They almost begged these guys to show up. Then they didn't have to because we're sitting near the Great Lakes. They need us more than we need them. And we better start negotiating for the future of humanity, the future of our people in these communities. If we don't, we're going to face consequences. And I'll say this last thing. There's no saying that this is some kind of tangible, sustainable market. 10 years or 15 years from now, I've heard some very informed kind of explanations that we could be looking at a bunch of skeleton data centers which aren't as utilized, because I believe this market was generated through institutional investors, private equity. They need to move a lot of capital, because if they don't move capital, what are they going to ultimately be able to build as their next innovative product? And their product, I guess, that's going to be hoisted on everyone is ChatGPT and a variety of these tools. And they're great, but you want to know something? is that an organic demand signal, or is that something superimposed? And I think it's more of the latter. Thank you for the opportunity to come on today.
We can't hear you, Bob.
Yep. Thank you very much, Stephanie. Marcell, that was fantastic. I really appreciate it. And I know you've got to go in about 3 or 4 minutes. So if you adjourn, we will not take it personally. We understand completely. Thank you for that wonderful presentation and perspective on this. I want to go to Greg Lawson next from the Buckeye Institute to respond to a little bit about what Marcell had to say. I kind of want to give everybody, even though Marcell had 2 shots here, the rest of us are going to be here for another hour and a half. But I kind of want to go back and forth and give me your opening salvo. Then we're going to get a lot more specific on questions. So Greg Lawson and Marcell has moved on now. Okay, so Greg, you're with the Buckeye Institute. If you would like to just give an opening remark on your belief on this, or if you want to respond directly to Marcell, as I gave Tom the same opportunity, go ahead.
Well, I think first of all, I'd say that there's the way that this whole thing has started in Ohio has not been very good. I think we have NDAs that are out there where local officials can't talk about things. I think that's a problem. I think it also severs a lot of the trust that people have with businesses. I mean, you know, I was talking with some folks from actually the industry during one of the data center joint data center committee hearings that the legislature had convened back in May and June, and you know, somebody was saying that when the oil industry was dealing with a lot of the horizontal fracturing, we were starting to see that revolution happen, especially in actually the Utica Shale and Marcellus Shale and all of that. There was an awful lot more effort by the industry to reach out to local communities and to talk to the communities and to get buy-in from the communities and, you know, to make investments in roads, to make investments there. Obviously, there's tax revenue from the severance tax. And they tried to actually there was obviously some opposition there, you know, for that as well, for a variety of reasons. And all, but there was a concerted effort to try to bring the communities along, and frankly, that hasn't happened like it should have, and that's been a real problem. So we need to do the industry needs to do a much better job of that on a community by community basis. But pulling the lens back, I think that there's a lot of things that the industry needs to do better. But the first thing is data centers are 21st century infrastructure. They're very important. Obviously, we've had certain kinds of data centers for a long time, but these new hyperscale ones are the ones that is obviously bothering everybody because they are so large. But there's revenue that can be captured, especially property tax revenue or pilot payments. That's something that we really need to dive into, I think, is that piece of it in particular. And we need to make sure that local communities are getting really their fair share of things that can be generated. We do see in other states like Virginia where property taxes have actually been lowered in Loudoun County, which is basically the data center capital of the world outside of Washington, D.C., has tons of them. And because they are paying property tax, we have a few distinctions in Ohio, which we can get into from a technical standpoint, but we can raise a good amount of revenue. We shouldn't be doing a bunch of property tax abatements and things like that. We need to have well-founded decisions at the local level and companies to make investments there at the local level. But that the residents can actually gain something, because I think that is important. But this is a net economic issue in the long run. It is about productivity. It is about innovation. It is about artificial intelligence and training artificial intelligence, which has implications up and down. There's going to be some negative ones. Marcell spoke about it with disruption. We don't really know what that's going to look like. You know, we've heard some very scary numbers from folks like Sam Altman with ChatGPT or with Dario from Anthropic. We've heard numbers. Now people are saying it's not going to be like that. But, you know, a lot of the research is looking at this, and it's just too early to tell exactly what this is going to be. For every job that's displaced, are there other jobs that are being created? That's usually how things happen in a market, although there can be lag time. But I believe that there will be net jobs created over time. But the other factor is that what AI is doing in terms of being able to find new discoveries in healthcare and a lot of other sort of industries, there's a lot of benefits to AI, and you need data centers to train the AI. So there's going to be reverberation effects throughout the economy, throughout the healthcare system, throughout the electric system. I mean, AI is now starting to be used to try to come up with better ways of doing transmission and things like that. And by the way, the electrical issues and the cost of energy is a huge issue. Certainly data centers are part of it. There's a lot of other reasons for that, which I hope we can get into. And finally, Tom mentioned it. I do think there's a long-term national security issue here. So much so that you do see data centers being literally attacked in the Middle East by Iran, and you have seen some evidence of foreign interest pursuing certain kinds of propaganda here domestically. We've seen some evidence of whether it's China or Russia, mostly China, because they're the ones we're in the most competition with. I do believe that is an element of this. I don't think it's the driver of anything or the opposition or anything like that, but I do think it's exacerbating things. And the reason why they're doing that is because they recognize that that's something that is an advantage to us, and they would like to hobble us with that as much as possible to reduce our innovative edge. So I think we have to look at all of these different pieces together.
Okay, Greg, thank you for that. Stephanie Stock, I'm going to go to you next. The words that hit me the most there, very of a long opening introduction there from Greg, were 21st century infrastructure. The kind of thing that if we were talking about 20th century infrastructure, we're talking about the electrical grid, and we're talking about, roads and highways and so forth. And this is the wave of technology in 2026 and beyond. So this is infrastructure that needs to be built. You can respond to that if you wish, or again, go off on your own with an introduction. Go right ahead, Steph.
So, yeah, I'm probably not going to go on to the infrastructure part of it right at the moment, because the biggest thing that I've seen with people reaching out to me personally is the huge concern with mostly water pollution, some with the air, noise, light, like all of those things play a huge role, because when they're located next to these communities, these are concerns. There's about 191 data centers that are currently operating, and everybody likes to talk about the closed loop system, which yes, is definitely the system that all the new builds should be using. But the reality is most of the old builds are not using those systems. So they are in fact discharging water frequently into the public municipality treatment centers, which are not equipped to handle the kinds of chemicals that are in the data center discharge water. And as we found out, I brought in an expert witness, Stephen Petty, to testify in front of the commission. And he discussed those issues, that those chemicals are not even monitored by the EPA. They're not required to be monitored. So when they say, hey, yeah, they're not on our radar right now, they're not something that we have found with data centers. Well, it's because they're not looking. So you can't find something that you're not looking for, and they're not required to set standards for those. So those are very big issues. And if we pollute our water, it won't matter how much AI we have if we have no clean water to drink, right? And the burden on the communities, as we do expand into, I know the EPA will be setting some standards for PFAS that'll be coming down the pipeline, I think in 2029, 2028, but it's not here yet. And when it does go into effect, all of the current systems that are taking in all this discharge water from data centers are going to be required to upgrade all of their systems to handle PFAS, and they're going to have an exorbitant amount of it because of what the data centers are putting in on top of the regular stuff that's in the environment that hasn't been regulated before either. So we're looking at a major cleanup situation, and that's going to be a huge, huge cost to the citizens. So those kinds of things have to be addressed. Also, again, the people feeling like they don't have a say. I mean, from the vaccine standpoint, I know what it's like. When you have a mandate thrust upon you, everybody rises up, right? And they're like, that's when they start protesting stuff, when you don't give them a choice. So I think with an issue like this, where it's a major effect on a local community, I do believe there should be a local vote on the ballot, because with all of these NDAs and everything going on, I'm hearing from people all over the state. They're in battles, fighting against trying to, whether the data center is going to be built over a big aquifer or whatever, and they have concerns and they're not being heard. And then their city councils are kind of being bought off, or a school, we're going to give this school $1 million or $10 million or whatever. And then pretty soon they're all bypassed. They're all coming in and testifying, they're protesting, but nothing's happening. Their voices aren't actually being heard because the data centers are wooing the committee members or some kind of school or whatever. And then so they're just getting it through, and the citizens aren't having a say. So I'm a very big proponent of there being an actual ballot vote. We do it on levies and everything else. There's absolutely no reason that we wouldn't do it for something like a giant data center right in a community where it's affecting it. So those are, there's other things too. obviously the energy, I don't believe they should be tapped into our grid at all, but that leads to another set of, again, you have then they got to dig wells and they got to do oil. And then it's like, why aren't we using that to power our own grid? Why isn't Ohio becoming more efficient with their own energy and reducing costs? Why are we letting the data centers dig? And it's a very complicated, big issue. But the water and the pollution and the having a say are the biggest things that I'm hearing from people on the ground.
All right, Stephanie, thank you very much. And going back over to the proponent side now, Jeff Mihalik is a businessman and the founder and president, Jeff, of NowDigi. Jeff, I think you're muted. Let's get Jeff unmuted there and there. Well, try it now, Jeff.
So I founded NowDigi. We're a consultant firm for the small business market. I've been in technology for the last 25 years plus. And, my goal, I've been an Ohio resident my entire life. I was born in Cleveland, have lived in Northeast Ohio my entire life. So I'm very concerned about our state and our communities. And so all the concerns that everybody on this panel have brought up are legitimate. And the thing that I'm, really want to see happen is that we don't end up with flat out bans and we don't end up with decisions that are made at the community level that are based on, hyperbole or fear, because I think that isn't good for us in the long run. These data centers do have a benefit to the community, both financially, with construction and everything else. I mean, even with the tax abatements and other things, there is a net plus, when you bring in any of these projects. And the data centers aren't any different than, say, warehouses or retail outlets where the community will give tax rebates to bring those things in. I live in Brecksville. We've got a big development on the south end of town that happened. And, there were tax incentives given to those organizations and those businesses to come in, and it's going to be a net plus for the community in the long run. A lot of the questions that come up around water, I certainly agree that we have to make sure that they're not discharging water. But I do know that going forward, those systems are going to be more closed loop because they've developed them. So I was at the NVIDIA conference, I've been at the Microsoft conference. There's a clip of Satya, the CEO of Microsoft, talking about how the modern data centers that are going to be built, and this is mainly what we're talking about is new construction, those are going to use less water than most restaurants do. I was 15 feet from Jensen Huang talking about the new Vera Rubin chips and how they're closed loop systems and how efficient they are. So, I think that issue can be mitigated. So it's not, again, we just don't want to see somebody come in and say, oh, we're going to ban it because every data center is using all our water and polluting the environment, where, on the whole, that's just not the case. And there's many other businesses that, car washes and golf courses that use far more water and also put chemicals in the water in the end. And, we have methods to clean those out. I think the bigger question on energy, which I think is certainly something that we need to be concerned with. Obviously, in Ohio, we've got a lot of natural gas. I think those, the ability to tap into that is one of the reasons they're here. And obviously the water, because we've got Lake Erie, the Ohio River. So we've got, the Great Lakes are 20% of the world's fresh water. So Marcell was correct in stating that, that resource is very attractive, and that should give us some leverage when we're talking to these businesses that want to come in and invest, that, they're going to want to tap into our natural gas and our electricity. We should get some benefit out of that. The community certainly should benefit. One of the things that I think, when Vivek Ramaswamy mentioned this, that, we've had some controversy around the nuclear power plants. it's something that I know a little bit about. One of my customers at my old business was the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, so I'm very familiar. I built their website and know a lot about the process for building nuclear power plants. It's one of the big things that in the scheme of things has really harmed us, is that we haven't developed nuclear power in this country. And it's one of the reasons that, people are so concerned, because if we bring on, these large data centers to the grid, it's going to have, some net drain of about 5 or 10% more energy demand overall across the country. And so I think one of the big ways that we can mitigate that, and there was just a project around small nuclear reactors. We had 4 of them that produced power on July 4th. That was an edict that came down from President Trump. So I think that those, doing some of those things, building small nuclear reactors would be a great way to get more grid power.
Okay, Jeff, I'm going to thank you for that. Obviously, we've been kind of letting everybody give an opening introduction here, and I've got 2 more to do here. Let's try to keep them at least moderately brief, only so that we can get as much specific questions. And I've got a list of them here that I want to ask all of you. By the way, when we get to that portion of this is going to be more free-flowing. It's not going to be just me identifying somebody. It's going to be 3 against 3. And if you want to buttress your colleague's point on this, and if you want to rebut another one and so forth, it's going to be much more free-flowing, FYI, as we get into it. But some opening remarks now from both of them are going to be on the opposition side now. It was a little bit unbalanced because of Marcell having to leave. But let me welcome Timberlake Mayor John Marra to the discussion. And Mayor, go ahead and give us your opening thoughts on the data center proliferation.
Yeah, good morning. Let me clarify. I'm not totally opposed to data centers. I'm just opposed to these mega data centers. There's a difference between the ones that they're proposing and the ones that we currently have. The ones that they're proposing are obviously 10 to 20 times larger than the ones we have now. And, getting on Stephanie when she was talking about the water quality, and we'll touch more on that later, but, yes, they're going to use less water with the closed loop, but you need more power, generate more power for that. And these behind the meter natural gas turbine generators that they're going to be installing now to take care of this power, they need water, because again, the secondary turbine in those need water to produce steam to basically make them more efficient. So, there's always a trade-off for everything. And again, the closed loop system, they have to be purged, which means those forever chemicals have to be purged into the wastewater system, which again, being a former sewer contractor, those chemicals these treatment plants are not designed to treat these forever chemicals or any chemicals for that matter. What they end up doing is getting passed through. And then even these closed loops, they need more water to dilute these chemicals so that they can meet the EPA requirements for the minimum amount of or the maximum amount of toxins that they're releasing in there. So that's one of the things. And then the other thing is, I think the biggest concern is I went through all the when they had the select committee on data centers, the one thing that disturbed me the most is that they basically discounted any of the public's legitimate concerns about pretty much about the concerns about the environment. They discounted all those and said that was misinformation on social media. And that was the most alarming to me, is that they really didn't take the environmental hazards seriously. And really, I think the most thing is that we want these data centers, but just not near residential areas. I think that's what we're going to touch on. So that's my opening for now. There's a lot more again I want to get into, so we'll get into that as we go into this. But yeah, that's where I'm at. Again, I'm not totally opposed. We need them, but then again, we don't need them in residential areas.
This is why we're here. And I think Stephanie told me something like that when we were planning this whole thing as well. She could almost be a proponent for this, just depending on the circumstances and the regulations, if you will. So I think there's a lot of common ground here. Eric Watson is a business owner and, again, a former candidate for the Ohio House, who was recommended actually by Marcell. I'd not met Eric before, but recommended by Marcell to be a strong voice here in opposition to the data center expansion. So Eric, go ahead, your opening thoughts.
Hi, Bob. Thank you for having me. Just want to let you know also, I was recently appointed to the State Council for the Maha Institute. So I will be working closely with them as well as other representatives in the future and projects here in Ohio.
Great.
One of the biggest, well, it's a multifaceted issue, as we all know. Myself being a small business owner, I love cash. And one of the biggest things is that with the blockchain technology, AI, data mining, which is going to lead to digital asset mining, we're going to see a shift away from a cash society heading more into a cashless society. I mean, pattern recognition is what shows you that. Also in House Bill number 116, that's enact the Blockchain Technology Act that's currently in the Senate committee. I gave testimony to this, but we actually have an issue because they reference data centers as digital asset mining businesses. When you look at the definition of a digital asset mining business, and then you look at the definition from the legislator of a data center, they're very much the same thing. So that's concerning because on page 40 in paragraph B, it literally lays out a welcome mat for data centers, AKA digital asset mining businesses, to go into any industrial zoned area as long as guidelines are met across the entire state of Ohio. That literally opens up thousands of locations across Ohio. Very alarming, and it gives statute authority. If this was to pass and become law, it gives it statute authority in the state of Ohio for digital asset mining businesses, AKA data centers, to go into any of these industrial zoned areas. It could take away the township's ability to rezone or replan. In the event that it does, in paragraph E, it actually says that digital asset mining business can, paragraph, let's see here. Yeah, paragraph E. And then it actually says that it gives a digital asset mining business basically a legal strong arm, so that if they feel discriminated upon because of a political subdivision of rezoning or replanning, then they can take that to the common court of pleas. That's not right. That is a workaround our constitutional rights of our local elected officials that constituents at the local level want in there. It's not supposed to work from, the top down. We're supposed to be going from the local level and going up to the state level and then to the national level. That's how it's supposed to work. And I think the mayor would agree with me on that as well, because you're closer to those constituents when you're a local elected official than if you're up the ladder. Becomes a big problem. The next thing is that as we move into a cashless society, we have to use what's called smart contracts. This terminology is actually laid out in House Bill 116. And one thing I enjoy doing is research. So when I bring things up, I do a lot of research to make sure I have clear evidence that supports what I'm saying, because the only thing that's going to get us through this period is truth. So smart contracts I'll be bringing up as well, and how blockchain works with that, because smart contracts will be actually eliminating bank jobs, lawyer jobs, escrow agents, payment processors, notaries, healthcare, and the United States Postal Service, and many, many more jobs to come. U.S. Senator Josh Hawley actually brought this up a couple months ago, roughly, and it was estimated that over the next couple of years, we'll probably see 20 million jobs end because of AI. That's not hyperbole, because I actually have family members that work in the AI industry and security, and they, pretty much came to me and said, Eric, my job won't exist in the near future. So, and the one thing I keep hearing is national security.
Let me jump in there if I may,
Yeah.
because I want to get the rest of the full back and forth going here, and it's
Sure.
perfect timing for you to say what you just said, for me to kind of get this launched here, because what I want to talk about now is I've got my questions grouped in a few different ways. And the first one is economics. And Tom, I want to group this now. Tom and Greg and Jeff, feel free to go at this as you wish. And then Stephanie and John and Eric can respond. But what Eric was just talking about, jobs. A lot of what we hear is that jobs are going to be created by the existence of these data centers. I have people on the other side saying not anywhere near as many that are going to be lost because of this expansion and proliferation of AI. So I want to let Tom and Greg and Jeff tackle this first. What is your understanding and what is your evidence of, if you have it, of the economic benefit here in terms of the number of jobs created that make you so ardently in support of the expansion of these centers?
Well, I guess I'll start, and then Greg and Jeff can jump in. The interesting thing is the current trends, because this prediction of massive job loss has scared a lot of people. And if you watch some of the podcasts, I watch a podcast called Moonshots by Peter Diamandis, and everyone listening to this should start watching it if you want to get the real inside look at what's going on with AI and things. And the trend is that there actually is no loss of jobs from AI. Even the companies that are bringing AI in, to help make their business more efficient, big brokerage firms, what have you. The fact is that they're actually growing employment, that there's more people being hired. We don't know how this is going to play out because, they said the same things when, the motor replaced the horse and tractors, replaced, mules and things, and farmers were going to be displaced, and they went to factories and other things happened. I think that, the other problem, with this whole discussion about, the future of AI is that it kind of confuses what we're talking about today, which is data centers and should we do them? All right. My position is this. I said at the beginning, it's about benefiting the community. So, Greg, I don't know if you can respond to this or not, but when I was at the Shalersville meeting, I'm watching this discussion and I'm sitting here saying, what's wrong with this picture? And when I'm literally in a room of 160 people, and there's a hot debate about this thing, and what I realized was there was nothing in it for the
Why don't we, Tom, you're breaking up. I don't know why your signal's breaking up there. Why don't we let Greg pick it up from there, and hopefully we'll get you restored. Go ahead, Greg.
Sorry.
I think the first thing I'd say is that we don't know everything that's going to happen because we're still in a very kind of the infancy of this industry and some of the things that are happening and how quickly models are changing. We just had Mythos come out and there was a delay of it because of national security implications and stuff. And now it's been partly released as Fable on Anthropic. It's one of the high-end models. And so things are constantly evolving. And so that's definitely an issue. And there's some early numbers that are showing that maybe entry-level positions and a lot of more white collar and kind of information oriented kind of jobs are not being picked up as much, but we have not yet seen like a mass, dislocation at this point. So unclear. I think Tom's point about earlier changes with technology that has come online, there is displacement. I will say I have some concerns about AI being a substantively different thing than other forms of technology, in the sense that AI has a cognitive impact, or that, from horses to cars, you have a lot of changes in how things work. And the computer was probably a little bit more like what AI is now. We started to see the mass of the personal computer, but the fact that it can do a lot of pattern recognition and that it can replace certain aspects of human judgment, that is somewhat different, pretty substantively different than previous technology. So I can understand whether it's the fear and whether it's the concern there. That said, early numbers, I think, are not showing mass decimation, certainly at least not yet. And the other thing that's always a challenge for folks that are generally free market advocates like the Buckeye Institute is the unknown, the things that are going to happen in the future that you can't necessarily predict. And whenever you try to make a policy that is based upon an extrapolation, based on incomplete data, which by definition is incomplete because it's forward-looking, you have challenges, and you're potentially snuffing things out before you know. So I am sensitive to the fear that's there. I have some concerns about AI in general, more than some of my colleagues even do, because I have concern. But I don't believe that the answer is dialing it back, because, frankly, in a certain sense, we're in a little bit. I've used this phrase legislature before, but we're in a little bit of an Oppenheimer moment, and that may seem a little bit like hyperbole, but I think that there's an interesting analogy here. When we developed the bomb, right, it was done because we were in a competition. We were at that time concerned and fearful that Germany was going to acquire the bomb first because they had really great scientists over there. And if we didn't do it first, they would. And so the thing that worries me sometimes is we're going to have to adapt to things as they change. But if we just try to stop or try to slow it down arbitrarily, that doesn't mean other people are going to do that either in other parts of the world. And I think that is something that is a great cause of concern to me, is the notion that we are somehow going to be able to do that. I don't believe it's true. I think that somebody somewhere is going to continue to do it. And right now, the person or the entity that's going to do it are not our friends. They're our number one geopolitical opponent. And depending on how that goes, you could literally see the entire way in which we process information being controlled by entities that are outside the United States. I have a real fear about that. We need to be very cognizant of that as an issue as we move forward in this overall fight on AI.
Okay, thank you, Greg. Guys, what I'm going to do, because it is so easy to morph from one element to another and all of these different things that we're talking about here, I want to try to really stay on each individual question at a time, and we'll move to the other things later. But let's focus on just the job issue here, which is, again, going to narrow scope this a little bit so we have time for all of the other questions here. Jeff, did you have any thoughts on the jobs? As a business owner and the founder of NowDigi, do you have any thoughts on the job creation that AI brings versus the job killing, or that the data centers bring, versus the job killing nature that many say is a part of AI expansion?
Yeah, the data centers, obviously, we can talk about the construction jobs and things like that. One thing that people don't tend to think about is that, if these data centers are these mega data centers, the construction times on these are generally anywhere from 3 to 10 years. So you're going to have these build outs happen over a long period of time, and it'll continue to help the local economy and hire those workers. As far as AI goes, what Tom said is correct, in that the data right now is showing that for every, and there's a study out that showed that for every company that was spending on average $30 per employee had increased their employment by 10%. And those companies that were spending zero or less or $0 on AI, that their employment had stayed the same or dropped. So what this early indicator is showing us is that AI is not taking jobs away; it's creating jobs. Just like I've been in tech for a long time, so I remember when we went from on-prem data centers where everybody had a closet full of computers in their office, and then we went to the cloud. Well, everybody was worried they were going to lose their jobs running the hardware in their local business. And what ended up happening was we ended up hiring more cloud engineers and expanding the amount of data and the amount of jobs in that area. I mean, even the internet, who ever heard of an SEO specialist 25 years ago? There was no such thing, right? So these jobs are created over time with the new technology. Now, nobody knows what they're going to be and how it's going to happen, which is why I'm reticent to put into the hands of politicians who in a lot of cases don't know anything about the particular topic, who try to be experts and legislate around the technology they don't know, and then end up doing, like I said, banning a certain technology or severely limiting it, like they did with nuclear power years ago, because people were scared of it. So now we don't have free, clean energy or abundant energy that we should have. And this is no different, as long as we can mitigate the other things.
Thank you, Jeff. Okay. And what I'm going to do now too, just in the interest, as I'm seeing this thing pace out here a little bit, I want to get as much ground covered as possible. What I'm going to start doing, guys, is I'm going to put a two minute timer on each question for each side to answer, and you can kind of do that, or maybe I'll do 3 minutes. That way, if each of you want to do a minute a piece or so, you can kind of gauge that yourself here. I just want to cover as much ground as possible. I still have a lot of questions on the jobs, and I want to get to the other side on that now. So Stephanie and John and Eric, what I'm going to do is give you guys 3 minutes to, amongst yourselves, tell me the truth as you see it about job creation for A, the centers, and B, or the job killing nature of it among AI itself.
I mean, I'll probably be the quickest because this isn't my big topic here, but yes, I do. I mean, there are going to be some construction jobs, temporary construction jobs. Like there's going to be some people that work in the facilities. I do see. I was a physical therapist assistant, so healthcare is always on my mind, of course. I do see them phasing out doctors probably altogether with AI because you type in your symptoms, blah, 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 they spit it out. I'm a little bit concerned about losing the humanity aspect in healthcare. And so, of course, that's on my mind. And also, eventually, we create jobs in the short term, but what happens in the long term? Do we build the system that makes us obsolete? And that is, I think, what everybody worries about. Nobody's worried about job creations right now. The unions are chanting for the data centers because right now it's a job. But what happens when we have robots and they can replace a mason or whatever? I mean, this is stuff we have to think about coming down the pipeline. So we don't know the numbers, you're right. But those are things that are on my mind, especially the humanity component in making decisions, like specifically in healthcare, when it's just, AI doing it versus a human who's sitting there with the patient looking at them and their family members.
I'm going to chime in here and just say that as far as the jobs, I don't think they create enough jobs to offset the tax abatements that they get. The biggest tax abatement they're getting first is the sales tax exemption to build these huge mega data centers. I mean, Ohio's losing billions of dollars in just sales tax exemptions alone. And then the next thing is that when they build these things out, I mean, like I said, you got jobs here. I mean, they're only temporary. I mean, they're only going to be for so long, and then again, they're gonna end. So, the other thing is that it's the jobs themselves, the income that they bring in, the revenue, they're only for the local community itself. It doesn't help the entire state completely, except for that little sliver that we get as far as the sales or the income tax from the state. So, that's where the biggest thing is. I mean, it's really the property tax exemptions would hurt the most, because by giving them a 75% tax abatement on the income or on the property tax, the problem is that everyone else has to pay more. I mean, as you know, 2/3 of a property tax goes to pay for schooling. Well, when the schools lose 75%, or that 2/3, when they lose it from these data centers that should be contributing, the problem is with the state is that when they do the valuations, these data centers come into play as far as the valuation of the property values of the entire community. So as that goes up, the state gives the community less money per pupil in state funding for this public schools. And that's where the biggest thing is, because 2/3 of our funding or of the property taxes goes to fund the schools. So, that's where I see the biggest problem with it is that, we have jobs, but the jobs don't offset, the revenue from the jobs don't offset the amount of exemptions that they're getting totally as far as with the property tax and the income tax. So that's why I chime in there.
I appreciate that. I'm going to move to the next question.
Hey,
Eric,
Bob.
you can go first if you want on it, because you didn't get your part of that 3 minutes there. But I'm going to start this with your side anyway. So Eric can go first, but the three of you will have the 3-minute response here to this question. And this is going to be the one about foreign competition. A lot of the folks on the pro side are saying we cannot afford to lose the AI race to China or Russia, or it is going to have devastating consequences to American tech and the American economy in the long run. So let's start there. How important is it to win the AI race, or the AI war, if you will, with China, Russia, and other American adversaries? So the con side, Eric, go first.
Well, the first thing is the National Security Memorandum that the Trump administration put together. In the overview, it says through the memorandum, agencies are directed to improve services to the public. That ain't happening too well in Ohio, across the nation, as far as I can see. And then secondly, it says while maintaining strong safeguards for civil rights, civil liberties, and privacy. Nobody wants to bring this up. I've given testimony twice on this at the Ohio State House, and nobody wants to recognize this because they know that once they do, they're going to have a heck of a time trying to actually follow that order, because that national security memorandum supersedes the AI executive order, which sits within it.
Team, Stephanie, John, thoughts on that part of this?
Go ahead, Stephanie.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I think that we are going to have safeguards. I mean, it's cute in name. They say, oh, we're going to have safeguards, but there are no safeguards. There hasn't been one law passed in this state. Don't we start on how absolutely non-proactive the state is legislatively, but we don't have anything, no guardrails in place for AI of any kind, nothing. I mean, so I think we're just like everybody's bombs away and nobody has anything prepared to protect us in any way, shape, or form. And again, and I agree with the one gentleman on, a lot of legislators, they don't know about what they're writing the bills about. So it's hard to write a bill about something you don't know about. But somebody's got to research it and somebody's got to look into what can we do to protect ourselves state law wise, because it's a huge issue.
Yeah.
I think also, everyone opens up with, we're in a competition with China. Well, what are we competing with China? I mean, right now, all I know is that they're using a lot of what the AI is for surveillance. And do we want to become a surveillance state? And I know another thing is they're putting up these flock cameras. They have cameras everywhere. They want to go to digital currency. They want to track everything. So again, as we covered in the beginning of the segment, we're heading toward almost like a surveillance state. Is that what we want? And these mega data centers, they're not like our ordinary data centers that we're using today. These are entirely different scale altogether. These things are huge. And again, when going through those hearings, they were comparing the mega data centers to basically the ones that we have now and to compare to the ones like in New Albany. Well, New Albany is entirely, that's almost like a city there completely. That's an industrial section that, that's what we should model off of, because again, we need these, but we don't need them. We need them on a large scale, but it needs to be away from residential areas. And we should really use New Albany as a model, because again, that's all that's there is just data centers, and their neighbors are other data centers and manufacturing companies.
Mm-hmm. And also, I just wanted to say something real quick, Bob. Everybody thinks that we're in a race for AI. The United States has won the race. We've obliterated everybody else in this race because we have nearly 4,400 data centers across our nation. 4,400. That is almost the equivalent number of all the nations added up together.
Wow, that's a stat right there. Okay,
yeah, China only has 350. 350. Probably because they don't have enough water to power it to do them, but who knows?
Okay. And we have a Chinese bit mining industry here in Ohio.
Mm.
Okay, Jeff and Tom and Greg, I'm going to give you guys 3 minutes. Your response on the importance of winning the AI race that they just said we've already won with China and Russia and others.
Yeah, Bob, I think that claiming that we've won the race is probably a little premature. One thing I would challenge the point that China only has 350. We don't know how many data centers China has. They're not, they don't, I know that we've got some intel on that, but they are building them as fast as they can. They're certainly building power as fast as they can. They've got more power going up than the rest of the world combined.
That's true.
What are they using that power for? Are we winning or losing we certainly have a lot of investment going that, and the frontier labs are here in the US, but the open source models, and anyone can go and download these, and everybody's probably heard about DeepSeek, which was a Chinese model. They're not very far behind our models, and I guarantee you that the open source models they're releasing are just the tip of the iceberg, and that there's other models that they have that are very close and going to be very close to what the US has. And if they are able to get ahead of us on those things, there's technology, there's things that they can do. For example, security holes. They can break into any systems, and we already have a big problem with that. I mean, they've broken into a lot of our technology in the past, and I think every social security number in the U.S. was leaked to China at one point. So it's really not something that we want to allow them to get ahead and win. Drone technology, robotics, all those things are going to come into play if they're ahead of us in that, and it really does pose a threat to us. Especially economically in the short term, but in the long term, our security. And that's something I'm very concerned with. So I'd like us to stay ahead of that, no matter what it is.
Well, about another minute here on this. Greg, go ahead.
So to clarify too, and I agree with everything that Jeff just said, the models that China has are slightly below ours because we are ahead in the frontier level. But they are also doing distillation attacks, which means that they're using top tier models, and they're actually getting Anthropic just announced that China was basically using Claude to basically train their own on the backside. So they're finding ways to do this, and there's a reason that they want to do that. Also, I'll mention that there was a thing several years back called Volt Typhoon, which was a state-sponsored Chinese cyber effort. And if you combine cyber with AI, and by the way, they were in tons of wastewater and infrastructure. So they were basically, to put it bluntly, they're putting Trojan horses in infrastructure in case we ever have a conflict with them. Now, I assume we're going to do the same thing to them, and we're going to probably be using AI to do that. So this is just the way it is. They may be able to turn water off. Now, we're not exactly sure the full level of the exposure, but it was pretty significant. And if you look at war games relative to this, it is very concerning to infrastructure and security professionals, the access that China has. So the notion, I think it's fair to say that we are ahead, but we are not way ahead. And actually also the diffusion, Jeff was talking about open models, they're actually embedding AI far more in their manufacturing processes, which means that they're building more stuff faster than we are. And when you look at military things and stuff like that, we're not the manufacturing behemoth we were in World War II. The United States is not. China is. That's a fact. And AI is helping them do it better. And so if we ever have a conflict with them, they will build more. They will be better at backfilling than we are right now. And that's a fact. And that's a problem that keeps people in Washington up all the time if you pay attention to the national security debate. So I think that's, again, why I make a strong reference to that. Now, there are a couple of things I did want to just get back because I thought there was a really good point that John made earlier, not on the China competition, but I want to be very clear about where Buckeye Institute is. We are actually in favor on some of these tax expenditures because this is something that really bothers people at that local level. And I actually agree with John. We need to not have a lot of these at the local level. We need to have the revenue flowing at the local level. The state sales tax exemption, we're actually favorable to. And we can talk about some of the technical reasons why we are for that. But at the local level, revenue should be going into the local communities. I think that's one of the biggest issues that we're seeing is that people aren't feeling like there's that benefit there. We know other states have managed to deal and have actually benefits on their property tax side because of the amount of revenue data centers have brought in. We should be capturing that kind of revenue at the local level to make sure that local residents are getting what's there. So I think that's something that we need to really zero in on. I hope the legislature really takes a look at how we deal with things at the local level because local government in Ohio, whole other subject that's worth its own conversation, but we have too many layers of local government that drive property taxes. This is something that I think we can ameliorate some of this, not all of it, but some of it by leveraging data centers at that local level. And I think we should try to do that.
Hey, Bob.
Yeah. Well, Tom, I'm gonna move to the next question, but you're first because your side is first here. And if you want to fill a little bit on that as well on the
I want to break some news on that. I want to break some news.
Oh, you do? Okay. What do you got, Tom?
Okay. So, and you and I have talked about how wonderful our Spectrum internet is. So I hope I'm coming through. Okay.
You're much better now.
So, I want to bring this point up because it was really something that shocked me. So I was talking about, I was at the Shalersville meeting and I'm saying to myself, what's wrong with this whole debate? And it occurred to me that telling people, hey, you should like these data centers because we're not going to poison your water. We're not going to, hurt your environment. You should just accept them. That's like a really weak argument. So then I said, well, what's the benefit? Well, you know, in Shalersville, the school district is going to get $5 million more dollars. Their budget's going to go up like 50%. The township budget was going to go up 100%, double. The fire department. And then I said, but wait a minute.
No,
Oh no.
There's that spectrum again, Tom. It's got you. Yeah, that's not working for whatever reason, and that's unfortunate. I'm gonna move here, guys, only because again of the clock, and I want to get some of the questions from our live chatters here. Tom, are you back? Yeah, he's still cutting out.
Tom, why don't you log on through your phone and just use your data?
Yeah, maybe that would be better. Maybe
Stephanie, I'll do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie, for that too. Okay, guys, I want to move to the next one, and then I want to get to some of the questions from some of the folks in the live stream or in the live chat. I want to talk, and Greg and Jeff, you'll have to be first on this. Conservatives usually champion free enterprise and private property rights, and we're all conservatives in this conversation. If a private landowner wants to sell land for a data center, why should or shouldn't the government or neighbors interfere? And bigger picture, where do you draw the line between protecting private property rights and protecting an entire community from unwanted development? Greg, Jeff, go ahead.
Well, we are big fans of the private property rights. We think that, and there's been some restrictions, not just in the data center area. First of all, we don't like the bans at the local community. I think that's deeply problematic. I think that we should be able to let people, generally speaking, do what they want to do with it. Again, there needs to be a benefit to the community. That's why we need to make sure we get our tax policy and obviously the regulatory policy for safety issues correct. I agree with all of that, but we should be able to allow people to make those kind of decisions. And I will be honest, the state has engaged in things where the state has said, local community, yes, we have home rule in Ohio. Frankly, I think our home rule in Ohio is actually a bit of a challenge. I think it's actually been a broad issue, and it's part of the reason we have high property taxes. But I'll digress on that point for a minute. And to say that one of the things is we've done preemption. The state has done preemption, and that's not on the table, by the way, right now. But when we were doing fracking, there were a lot of local communities that tried to ban and prohibit us from being able to do that. And the state basically did a statewide preemption, said, no, you can't do this, and create a patchwork of regulation because of how many different local government entities we have. The problem with local government in Ohio is we have too much of it. We have, way more layers of local government than southern states and western states do. And, when you have that much of a veto-ocracy on things, you create a lot of problems. Now, this is not just a data center issue. This is a broader question, and it's a problem that I think that really isn't bad for Ohio economically. But it also does apply to data centers. So if farmers or people wanted to sell their land rights to do fracking, we wanted them to be able to do it. We know there's some issues with some other kinds of energy generation where we have some things that are stopping electric generation. I'm not a huge fan of solar and wind. I don't think it really works as well in Ohio as it does in other states. But if somebody wants to sell, a farmer wants to sell land to be able to do something like that, they should be allowed to do it. I think the same thing applies to data centers. That is something that America has always been very big on. The key is to make sure that once those things come, they do take care of all the issues we were talking about before in terms of tax revenue for the locals and public safety.
Got about a minute left on the pro side here, Jeff. Anything, Tom?
Yeah, I'll just chime in really quick that I think that, as long as you've got the proper zoning in your community, obviously, every community should control their zoning and decide where industry can go and where housing can go. And so as long as you're following that and giving the communities their say based on their laws, I don't believe that the state should interfere. There is the only caveat to that would be on the power and water, things like that, where you've got utility and infrastructure. That's always something where you may need a state to get involved, but we want to limit that as much as we can and make sure that if you need a right of way or anything like that, that the community is properly compensated and that they have their say before they just throw up some power lines.
Thanks, Jeff.
I have a quick comment if there's time for our side.
Well, this is your side. You guys have 3 minutes now, so you guys can spread this out however you want. Your thoughts on the property rights aspect of this, and specifically people in their neighborhoods, even if their properties are not being taken, but the adjacent properties are by these centers. That's a big concern for many on your side, I know. Go ahead, you guys, 3 minutes.
Yeah. So as far as being able, I mean, listen, I believe you should be able to sell your property, of course. The issue is you aren't the only one with property rights. If you sell to a mega center and all the other property value around goes down, you've affected the other people's the ownership of their own property. You've affected their ability to be able to resell their property. So in this case, I believe, again, coming back to, if it's required to have a vote with anybody that's within a 5 mile of a proposed site, if the citizens vote yes, we're okay with a data center, then that farmer, whoever that wants to sell their land, yes, they can sell it for that purpose. But I think because of the sensitivity of the data center, the light pollution, the noise pollution, all the other potential effects on property value, I think you can't discount the property ownership of everybody else around where that's going to go. You can't just say, well, we're all for property rights for the one guy that's selling it and screw the rest of the people around him. So I think a vote settles that issue. It allows the people around that site to have a vote and say whether or not they want it to go there. And if they do, then the guy can sell the property. And if not, then they need to find a different location. That's my opinion.
And to expand on what Stephanie just said, again, I believe that residents should be able to opt in, not have to opt out. Right now, it's these are coming and it's like, oh, we don't want them. Now we have to try to get out of it. The problem is, no, it should be voted on. It's just like, wait, do you people want this data center in your residential area? It all comes back to what I said in the beginning. I mean, we need these, but these mega data centers, these aren't like your conventional ones we have now. These are 10 to 20 times the size. And again, why do they want them in residential areas? Well, a couple things. One, they need domestic water. Okay, they need that, number one. Number two, they got to have power. Okay, that's where the power is in these residential areas. And again, where the main lines go through. And number three, they need fiber optics. So they have to have a fiber optics to feed that. So those are the three things they need. And that's why they're in residential areas. But see, I think, again, what we need to do is it needs to be more broad. I mean, we need to put them in areas, local areas. And I think I talked to Greg once before on this, where I said, we need to create these areas just like we have in New Albany. You have, 4 or 5 carve out areas where you have these huge areas where they bring in all the mega data centers there. And again, with this behind the meter power generation, that's all great. But see, what we're not touching on, and I'm sure we'll get on that again, is the power generation side. We're not going to have enough power in 2030 for all these data centers that are going to come on. And I'm sure that's going to be in the next segment here.
Yep, he's exactly right. I actually attended the Decimal Digital Data Center public forum with the city council in Monroeville. And it was brought up that we only have 25% of the actual infrastructure in the state to run these proposed data centers, 25%. That means that you're going to need a heck of a lot more infrastructure. That means more high tension power lines streaming across people's properties and farmland. And on top of that, Ohio's, one of the largest agricultural states at $15.4 billion market value. That's pretty significant. 87% of Ohio farms are family owned and operated. What we see in Ohio is that farmers don't want data centers. They're adamantly opposed to data centers. The only farmers that want them are the ones that are getting paid $250,000 an acre. But the problem is when they receive this sort of funding, from indirect or you could say direct World Bank donors, that's what's pushing this market right now of AI and data center developing. The money is like endless because it's connected either directly or indirectly to World Bank donors. So it's endless. It's an endless supply almost. On top of that, you now have the issue of constituents' voices not being heard at the local level. The reason is because when they go to their elected officials and they say, hey, do this, do this, do this. Well, what happens is at the local level, because there's, not as much funding as a data center developer has, the army of attorneys come in and they corner the one or two attorneys that maybe the city council has on retainer or whatever, and they basically fold because they don't have that type of funding to keep fighting this.
Okay.
So that's a constitutional issue at this point.
Okay, Eric, thank you. So here's what I'm going to do. Again, this is really weird how this is. My next question was going to be about power generation and about the electrical grids and so forth. And you guys literally segued right into it. So here's what I want to do for the balance of our time here. Rather than one side and the other side, I want this to be free flowing now. I'm going to ask the next question. I'm going to put 3 minutes on our clock. And by the way, if y'all can see your screens while we're doing this, I'm going to do this for you so you can see literally where we are, because I want everybody to kind of abbreviate their comments as necessary. So we can get all of this stuff in. So I want this to go both ways. You can respond to your opponents. Again, we're all kind of on the same side here, but in this issue, as you wish. This isn't going to be just one side against the other. And the question I had written was, which again, you guys already started to address, is can the Ohio electrical grid realistically support large-scale data center expansion without driving up costs for homeowners and manufacturers? And should existing Ohio residents bear any increased utility costs so that multinational tech companies can expand here? So it's both a capacity for the grid and the power to be generated to run these things, and then the cost of that capacity. So I'm gonna open it up here, and I'm gonna let Tom, since he's had the most problems with this, start. And he's now back, it looks like, on the phone. Nice suggestion from Stephanie there. So I'm gonna put 3 minutes on the clock here to debate this out. You guys can take this as you will. Go right ahead.
Well,
Tom,
so
let me just say that I agree.
Oh, your phone froze too, Tom.
Okay, let me just say that I agree 100%.
Give it a shot, Tom. Okay.
100% that the PUCO has really dropped the ball on the energy side, and we are really in a big problem. Even before the data centers, we were having problems with, having proper generation. It has to do with the BGM consortium that we're in, where Ohio is generating more power, but it's not being used here in Ohio. It's going to New Jersey and other places. The legislature has done a terrible job of holding the PUCO accountable, and this is a significant obstacle for this whole data center issue.
Free for all, guys.
I totally agree. And we're also, Ohio's tapped into multiple states' grids. I mean, I'd be a proponent for, let's develop some power centers for us and have our own independent Ohio grid that's safer from China, by the way, and make these other data centers build their own. I believe, and I mean, I've written legislation on this. It's still not back from LSC, but I believe that any new development needs to have their own off the grid power source. That way there can't be any way they tap into us. There can't be any way we have rolling brownouts. If they're responsible to get their own power, they will do it. If they're responsible, they can afford to pay for it. So we should have them do that. I mean, that's what I believe. And that's what everybody that I talk to believes.
Well, the other issue is that, we're going to burst the bubble of artificial intelligence here. We're going to go into quantum technology. Yeah. Many technologists already know this. So they're hurrying as fast as they can to build these big data centers that require way more energy, when quantum technology is going to require a lot less energy. So once again, we have a speculative bubble that's going to pop at some point. And what are we doing? We're putting the cart way in front of the horse. And in doing so, we're going to impact people's property values. But we haven't gotten into eminent domain issues that we're going to see here pretty soon. Because in order to supply enough energy and start fracking and tapping into natural gas wells, which are all over Ohio, we're going to see huge issues with that. I mean, you're going to have constituents come out of the woodworks. Farmers are already fearful of this whole movement. So
I think
it's not even hyperbole at this point. It's actual fact. I can bring these people to testimony at some point as long as they have the ability to speak. But this is what's happening. And on top of this, back to the water issue, Stephanie, just real quick, because that's part of infrastructure and property values. People are now having their water wells put into a state of degradation. We have testimony of this. This is actually occurring in Ohio, not another state, in Ohio, specifically Lancaster, Ohio. So why isn't this in the media? Well, we already know why, but there's so much money that's not backing we the people anymore, and it's all about one corporation.
Greg, you had a hand in the air. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, we definitely had an elect. I think Tom was hitting this on the head. Even before the rise of data centers, we had problems. We are part of a 13-state grid. Most states, by the way, are part of multi-state grids. Not all of them are in the same one we are. There's only one state that has largely their own independent grid, and that's Texas. And even there's a little bit of Texas that falls into other state grids. And the reason you do that is because you actually want to be able to pull from multiple states and do various things. So there's advantages to doing it. The problem we have is PJM, the one that we're in, has more problems, I think, than some of the other regional transmission groups in terms of being able to connect new generation onto the grid. And something that we also really screwed up on for years, not just Ohio. And actually, Ohio wasn't as bad as some other states, but the Green New Deal and all of the efforts that the Barack Obama's administration and Joe Biden's administration did when we were taking coal power plants offline and everything, we dropped gigawatts worth of the generation capacity that we just took offline, right? And isn't there now. So when we had a very limited demand going up prior to the rise of data centers, we were actually getting rid of generation capacity and trying to put on intermittent resources like solar, like wind, that don't always work all the time. We don't have industrial scale battery at scale to be as effective in that as possible. And as also, I think, as Jeff was mentioning, we haven't been building nuclear power plants for decades, since 3 Mile Island. So because of all of these issues, we ended up putting ourselves in a real bind. And then we had weatherization issues. And by the way, we have a grid that is, in many respects, at the end of its lifespan because of some of how it was built. So we were actually going to have to redo and upgrade. And we have old technology on a lot of these lines. We could do what's called reconductoring, which actually improves the power lines, makes them more efficient. We need to be doing all of those things, and we should have been doing them before data centers, because part of the problem is we already had a pre-existing problem that we didn't deal with for decades, and now it's all kind of coming to a head at one time.
Yeah. Let me touch on what Greg just said, though. During PJM's testimony during those hearings, they said that roughly by 2030, that 40 gigawatts of generation is going to be retired from our grid, and they're going to be putting about 52 to 53 gigawatt replacement generation by 2030. However, the problem is that all we need to do to get them off the grid is just flip a switch. But to put them on, it's going to take years to build these generation plants. So they already said that there's going to be a gap in the power generation versus the supply part. So what's going to end up happening is that they even said during the testimony that during times of peak demand, they're going to ask these data centers, these mega data centers, to get off the grid and go to their backup power generation, which means they're going to be running these diesel generators, these behind the meter generation, which again require more power. And the other biggest thing I think is that, we've got this big data center going in Portsmouth, Ohio. They're going to put in this 10 gigawatt data center, and they're going to be actually producing 9.2 gigawatts of behind the meter power generation with this natural gas turbine generators. The thing is with that, although they're going to be consuming about one third of our total consumption of natural gas is what they're going to use just for that one site alone, which means then obviously our natural gas prices are going to go up. So our heating costs are going to go up now when all these natural gas power generators are being put online by 2030. Now, instead of having a problem with electricity demand and our rates going up because of the demand on electricity, now they're going to be a huge demand on natural gas, because again, they're going to need a lot more power. And to do that with natural gas turbine generators, you need, again, natural gas and a lot more water for those natural gas turbine generators. And again, that's where the water comes into play.
And Mayor, I want to hit on a point that you brought up was the energy with the 1 gigawatt data center. Just to kind of put it in perspective, is the equivalent to 13,700 5G cell phone towers. The reason I bring this up is because something that's not being addressed is energy can, not be created nor destroyed. And so the byproduct of that is non-ionizing EMR or EMF radiation. Well, we have no actual requirement through the Environmental Protection Agency to measure non-ionizing EMR or EMF radiation. And why I bring this up is because we're taking a huge centralized location, okay? We're putting them next to rural communities, and we're putting data center inside it. And they could be 1 gigawatt up to 25 gigawatts. If we interpolated that at 25 gigawatts, the data center equivalent energy now jumps to 344,000 5G cell phone towers. We have to be a little bit more proactive of what we're doing as far as energy usage in a centralized location with a large footprint. We now are at 224 data centers across the entire state, and we're 4th in the nation. And so I just wanted to bring that up.
Yeah, Eric, I'm glad you gave that stat. That's a crazy stat, what you just said, 344,000. I want to get some response to that from Tom and Jeff and the other side. Tom, now that you're back in, can we hear from you?
Yeah, so, this is what's great about this discussion and what's great about citizen activism. Because as we've seen, you can look at Nick Shirley and when he's doing to investigate fraud, we have all the agencies that are supposed to be watching.
Tom, I don't know if you can hear yourself the way we are hearing it, but it's just not audible.
Right? It's just crazy. And so what we need to do is exactly what Stephanie's doing and Eric and Marcell, and that is ask the questions. But then what I want to talk to everyone about is forcing people to find solutions. We can fix these things. It's really malfeasance that we don't address these things, as he's talking about, the EMF and things like that. We have the technology to figure this out. We just don't. And so to me, the problem is the legislative side, the bureaucracy, the government side, not the data centers themselves. I don't think they have buildings.
Stephanie, you're nodding in agreement here. I'm gonna ask Tom to hold on for a second because it's just not all audible, unfortunately. Stephanie, you're nodding in agreement with Tom about the legislative side. I'm thinking.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the legislature is not proactive. I mean, listen, Bob, it's not a newsflash. We're 6 years after COVID. We still can't pass a vaccine choice bill. I mean, we are not cutting edge over here, legislatively speaking. Our leadership has does not tend to address issues ahead of time. They're just not proactive. If they were, we probably wouldn't be debating right now. If they had the EPA regulating the chemicals these guys were discharging, if they had set standards on them having their doing their own energy, if they had thought, hey, maybe we shouldn't be giving them billions of dollars of tax credits because that might piss people off. I mean, this isn't rocket science, and this could have been something that would have been handled. We've had data centers. I think the first one was built here in 2015, 2016. It's 2026. We shouldn't why are we now begging them to pass bills? It's good night. This should have already been done.
Yeah, I think that's
and one of the biggest things too.
Eric, hold on for a second, Eric, because Jeff was trying to get him before when I was talking to Tom. Okay. Jeff?
Yeah, I think that one of the things I said, it's all about perspective. So the total energy usage of all data centers in the U.S. right now is about 4 to 4.5% of our total energy, which is a lot, but it's not the doom and gloom that some people have proposed it to be. And the growth in it's going to grow of current generation as much as anywhere from 7 to 12%. So that's a significant increase. But I think that we've got the capability to generate the power. We just have to get through, some of the legislative issues that we have here in the state and some of the regulatory things that we have to make sure that we can build enough capacity. And, we've got plenty of natural gas in Ohio. We have enough natural gas in Ohio to run the entire country for more than a decade. just on natural gas. I mean, the country as a whole has a lot, but nuclear power is one of the solutions that we desperately need. The good news is for the folks who are concerned about the data center build out is that the chips aren't really available. The turbines really aren't available. Most of this stuff is backed up 2 to 4 years right now. You can't buy an NVIDIA chip and you can't buy a turbine in this country. I don't care how much money you have. We just can't build them. That's why, you see Micron and SMC and Samsung's stock going completely insane because everything they have to sell in the next 4 years is already sold. So that's going to, no matter what, whether agreements or disagreements on on building data centers, it's not going to happen as fast as anybody who's investing in it wants it to. And the power capacity is the same thing. We're going to have some time to solve these problems before these things are built. And I just think we need to, as Tom was trying to say, just get it done because we certainly have the capability to build as much power as we need in this country. We just, we're taking it offline and we shouldn't have ever been doing that.
All right. Thank you, Jeff. I want to ask this question to the whole group, okay? And anybody can answer this. I don't care which side of this that you're on. If not Ohio, where? Okay, if the AI is here to stay, which I believe it is, I think we can all agree on that. If AI is here to stay and its uses are so many and varied and some good and some not so good, but if it's here to stay, it's going to take these data centers. It's going to take it. If not building them in Ohio and Ohio farmland near Ohio neighborhoods and communities, which seems to be the biggest problem for so many people, do we just export it to Iowa, export it to other states? If not Ohio, where? And what will the economic impact of that be? And anybody can take that.
Well, I think the first thing is, yeah, it might go to other states, but one thing that could be a challenge is, and I think the industry, again, as we said at the beginning, needs to do a better job of talking to the communities. I think that is one of the biggest problems early on in this build out was a lack of doing that has really created a real lack of trust in a lot of communities and has created a lot of backlash that I'm sure there was always going to be some concerns, but the level of backlash, I don't think was inevitable. And I think the industry did not do a good job on the front end with that at all. And so the real problem is that this debate that we're having right here isn't just, we're not the only state that's having this debate. This debate is happening in other states as well. And the one thing that I think is a concern that I have is if a state that has been as strong in the development of them so far as Ohio has, if we end up, doing something like passing this constitutional amendment, which I don't think is going to happen necessarily, but if that were to occur, let's say hypothetically, that is something that other states are going to look at. And so what we might end up with is you might end up with a lot of other states following in that path. So I do worry a little bit about that situation as well, because I think we're a little bit behind the 8 ball. I think that some of the timing is going to be a challenge. There's a lot of issues that have to be worked out. And I think that some of the concerns and fear, some very, very legitimate, some I think a little overdone, but if it happens and we start shutting things down in Ohio and it gets shut down in other states, now we have a much bigger challenge. And that's something that I could see happening.
Well, I just want to say something to that. Elon suggested outer space, in other realms. So maybe we just start sending them that way. But the biggest issue is that we are taking away a lot of farmland and a lot of land for the purpose of data centers. I mean, we're talking thousands and hundreds of thousands of acres, actually. And what is the cutoff? Is it 250? Is it 300? Is it 400? Virginia's around 400 data centers now. And now their aquifers can't even replenish as fast as what's needed now. So now they're seeing actual issues with the water aquifer. Natural resources do run out if they do not have time to replenish. That's just a proven fact in itself.
I think
Tom, hold on one second if I could. Tom is back. And Tom, in my intro, when I played that little a mashup of news coverage of this, I included one of your videos from your podcast. And you said, particularly with the one that you visited, you said this whole thing about the water not being replenished and the water resources being completely, absorbed is don't worry about that. It's not true. Do you want to respond to what Eric just said?
Well, so I think what we're talking here, and is really good for the audience to understand, is what Stephanie said. There's a big issue between the ones that currently exist that use a lot of water and the new ones they're going to build that are not going to use a lot of water. And we're not often drawing those distinctions. We're also having a great discussion about the difference between these mega gigantic data centers and what we've been used to. The one in Shalersville is not a giant thing. It's like a regular factory you would see all over Northeast Ohio. And then we were also differentiating between tax abatement and things like that. What was great in Shalersville, they're not even asking for any tax abatement at all. They shouldn't. They can pay their way. There should be no tax abatement. Then we talked about zoning. The mayor talked about zoning. What they did in Shalersville is data centers were included in the zoning for this industrial area. You're talking about taking farmland. A lot of the stuff is in
Okay, Tom, we're unfortunately, you start out strong and then your signal fades on you and it just continues to hit you. And I
wanted to
about that.
follow up with what Bob said.
Well, hold on a second, if I could, because I want to get some other viewpoints on this too. And in particular, what Thomas is saying about the certain types of the current data centers and the water usage and future ones, the larger ones and so forth. I want everybody to address this. In fact, Jeff, I want you to address this first because you work for a tech company or founded a tech company. When I interviewed can we all get a hand in the air if we want Vivek Ramaswamy to be our next governor? Can anybody not going to agree with that? Mayor, your hand is down. Mayor, your hand is down. We might have to deal with that. I spoke with Vivek Ramaswamy 2 weeks ago. And he told me, and Jeff, you take this first, and anybody else can follow up on this. He said that the new chips that are being developed are self-cooling. The ones that are going to be used in most of these data centers, they're not going to need the water consumption and the resources because the chips are self-cooling. That's the new development that is happening in these. Now, I don't know anything about chips other than potato. You tell me, Jeff, if you can, is that something that's happening? Will that negate the long-term need for such massive amounts of water?
Yeah, and to be clear, there's different kinds of chips. So NVIDIA makes GPUs, and those run hotter. But their new system, again, they use closed loop cooling, so it does use a lot less water. There's also TPUs, which is something that Google is developing, and those chips don't require the cooling. They are, a lot of them are air cooled or self cooling, so they're mitigating the problems with the water usage. But I always like to put these things in perspective. And we've got Lake Erie as a water source, right? And I certainly don't want to pollute it because I was born right next to it and I live down the road from it and I love it. But the fact of the matter is Lake Erie is 128 trillion gallons of water. If we took in the water usage for every data center on the planet, we could run every data center for over 7,000 years. And if you clean the water never goes away, but just Lake Erie alone, the typical data center, even if you're using a standard liquid cool open loop system, it uses about the same amount of water as a standard thunderstorm would drop in your area in 20 minutes. So, water is the most abundant resource on the planet. The problem is we don't always clean it the way that we should. And that's what we really should be concerned with, is just making sure that any water usage is, ends up getting filtered the way that we need it to.
Yeah, I think that the biggest thing, bigger than the water usage. Can I speak or do you need to go?
No, you're good. I said anybody next and you jumped in, so you're next.
Well, he's talking about water and this is my thing. So when people talk mostly about the water usage, which is an issue, especially if it's by people's private wells and things like that. But the bigger issue is the millions of gallons of polluted water that are getting dumped. Now, again, and I've written this into the legislation that's not back yet, but every facility that's built must have a water treatment facility, whether that's a half of a room because they are a closed loop system and they're only going to discharge for repairs and or every 3 years, 5 years, 8 years, whatever it is. They have to have a system in place to handle completely cleaning every chemical that they have got in that water before it goes in the municipalities. And the state needs to require every existing data center to install the same water filtration. They have to clean it before they put it back, because otherwise the burden falls on the taxpayer. And I will beat that drum. And honestly, if the legislature doesn't act on the provisions that I've included in this, OAMF will personally start helping collect signatures for a ban, because they're either going to do it right or we're not going to let them do it at all. And to speak to your guys' points, yeah, okay, so we start banning them here, other states start following suit, and then we do fall behind. But if these guys want to operate and if they want to move into a new future, they're going to have to do it the way humans want to do it. Because we control whether or not this thing's going to go down. And so the legislature, I hope, will listen, because if citizens don't get a vote, and if these facilities are not cleaning their water before they're putting it back, and they're not using the least amount of water possible, citizens will continue to move towards banning them. 70% of people do not want it nationally. So if states don't get it right, and Ohio can lead the way, or we can lead the way in doing it right, or we can lead the way in banning them, the state legislature is the one that has the choice. So
Also,
I think we're going to play hardball with them.
Also, Bob, to your point, you were saying that you were told by gubernatorial candidate Ramaswamy that NVIDIA is making a self-cooling chip. Well, if that is in fact true, then the state leadership should regulate how much water is able to be used daily by a data center. And we can base that on actual energy usage that they would be using. Secondly, we need to, back to the Bob's point, we need to put infrastructure planning in place for environmental protections against non-ionizing EMR and EMF radiation. It's a real byproduct. Just because we don't see it doesn't mean it's not there. So we need to make sure that we actually take measurements of this to see what the actual emitting is, because we're talking about a huge facility that will run 24/7 without stopping. So that's a long exposure rate. So long exposure rates with even low non-ionizing EMR, EMF become a big issue, especially with as much energy usage that we're talking about into one centrally located area. The next thing is that we wanted to bring up energy and where all this energy is going to be coming from. A data center, according to statute, is considered critical infrastructure. So in the event that there is a state emergency or a national emergency even, that critical infrastructure would receive power over a homeowner or a small business. So we need to kind of look into this a little bit further, because if we're already so behind on our electrical infrastructure, you better believe that we're going to be the ones in the dark or the brownouts or whatever it is. It's a real possibility. I mean, we can't just deny it.
No, I agree. The infrastructure is crucial, obviously. All of our infrastructure is crucial, which is kind of interesting, because way back in the first hour, one of you guys talked about 21st century infrastructure. This is like building the grids that we built, building the plumbing system, building all of the infrastructure that we have done over the course of the last 200 years. This is the new version of it. But in order for the new version of infrastructure, or not new version, but the new infrastructure, the data centers, AI, to be built, we need to strengthen those which are already built. I think we all agree on that. What I want to know, though, is about one other thing here, and that is I want to talk about the key word here in data center, which is data. A lot of people believe that the data centers are going to lead to an expansion of mass surveillance. the collecting of data on all of us. This is one of the biggest things. I forget. I think Stephanie said that the numbers show 70% of Americans don't want data centers, at least near them. And so if 70% of the people don't want them, based on a lot of the resources things we're talking about, jobs or no jobs, economic impact, water pollution, et cetera, et cetera. What about just the aspect of what a data center does? It collects data on everybody. Is that a concern? And anybody can answer.
Well, I think it's a concern
Yeah.
because, I mean, everybody wants to have data privacy. I will say it's going to be interesting in the future how we look at this, because we were talking briefly about quantum, which is kind of next generation, but quantum and AI are going to work together, and quantum is going to be able to break basically all the current cryptography that we have in the world. So you're going to have new sorts of ways of containing the information, because it's going to be gone and stuff. So I think that this is a long-standing issue. It's not just the data center issue or AI. It's a much bigger issue about how you preserve those things. I actually got hacked. I ended up getting my private information was given to the federal government because I was going to work for the U.S. State Department at one point in my career. I didn't ultimately get it, but I got a security clearance. I got hacked by the Chinese. And so my wife's information, my first son's information, and my private information was hacked by the Chinese Communist Party. And that was with the Office of Personnel Management 15 years ago. They got everything. China does. Truth be told, I hate to be the one to say it, but that's probably the case for almost everybody around. And it's going to be a problem. And how do we safeguard this information? But I don't think that there's going to have to be new security protocols and things like that are put into place. But I don't think that it necessarily equates to the fact that if you shut down data centers, you're going to save your data and you're going to save your information, because it's already been taken care of in ways that are not good in the past. So what we need to be is be proactive in the future and make sure that we're staying on top of technology. And one of the biggest things is you actually have to use AI now to protect AI in the future, because you need to stay ahead. If you're going to stay ahead of the security issues and the concerns and the ability for other malign actors, whether it's other states, whether it's criminal syndicates, whether it's things like that, there's going to be people who are using this stuff. And if we don't be at the bleeding edge, they will be, and they're going to be getting it. I think that's one of the things. Is the irony is cat's out of the bag already. Now we have to be proactive and forward thinking about what we do. And if we become too opposed, or we start shutting things down, that's not really going to solve the problem. It may actually just empower some of the negative bad actors that already have access to things. So
I want to hear from Tom now, because we got to get him while the getting's good. And it seems like it starts out okay and then it fades. Yeah, Tom's had the least talk time here because of his signal cutting out. Go ahead, Tom.
Okay, so I want to bring up a really important point, and it goes to what Stephanie was saying. This is a really big issue for this election. The bottom line is that the Republican Party needs to lead on this, or we're going to lose, because people are not going to turn out to vote. And some of you may have seen my email that I sent out about the gas tax not being, suspended on Friday, where I'm saying to, whether it's Vivek or Matt Huffman or Macaulay or any of them, the Republicans need to step in and do what Stephanie's saying. Lead on this. Say, you got to fix this. You got to do it right. It's got to benefit the people. Ohio is going to lead the nation in how to do data centers safe and well. But they're doing nothing, and they're making it worse by doing nothing. And that's why we need to pressure our elected officials and say, doing nothing is not acceptable. You've got to grab this by the horns, because all the issues we brought up, there are fixes for all of them. Why aren't they being fixed? Because people aren't stepping up and doing their job. That's my viewpoint. And so I'm asking all of you guys listening to this podcast to talk to your legislators and say, get ahead of it. Fix the power issue. Do the things that Stephanie said. Clean up the water, the chemicals. Do the things with the sound, and let's do the investigation, because there are fixes to all this, and it's not getting done. And it's because our elected representatives are either on the take or they're just not doing their job.
Well, I agree with you. That
and
is
also,
hold on, please. Hold on, please. That is a very, very, very big issue. Our elected officials do need to do more. And I agree with you. Republicans need to lead. I haven't heard from the mayor, speaking of elected officials, for a little while here. Mayor, Marra, Timberlake Mayor, your thoughts on what we just discussed, specifically with respect to the surveillance, mass surveillance, data collection, and so on and so forth, and then also Republican leadership. Go ahead, Mayor.
Well, I mean, yeah, we need to lead the way, but I think we need to think about what the people want. I mean, I think what I've heard about all these arguments, the main thing is residents just don't want them in their backyard. They don't want them built near them. I think everyone's in agreement. We need them. We want them. But we're talking about these mega huge data centers. And I think what we need to focus on, one, first of all, just not in our residential neighborhoods. Number two, communities should have to opt in, not opt out. If they really want them, they should vote. And it should be a super majority wanting them in, not just a minor majority. The other thing is, again, they should not be allowed to tie in the grid unless they have their own behind the meter backup power generation so that they don't put a strain on our grid. And then again, these tax abatements, they don't need these tax abatements. As a matter of fact, Microsoft even said during their testimony, they go, oh, we can live without all these tax abatements. So they can still build them and still make a profit without them. Of course, if we're going to give it to them, it's like giving a kid a candy and then trying to take that candy bar away. They're not going to, they're going to always want it. So these are some of the things. I mean, if we can do these things, then we can lead the way. And as Republicans, we need to dominate, and we need to, again, lead the way as far as this, because, again, we need these, but we don't need them in residential areas. I think that's where we're losing the main focus. And as far as the power, we can deal with that. Again, with the PJM grid, we can bridge that gap. We've got, a lot of resources for that. But again, I think that's what people are not looking at is the bigger picture about what the residents really want. They want them, but they don't want them in their neighborhoods. That's the main thing.
Hey, Bob, can I hit on surveillance state real quick?
Sure.
So the definition of a surveillance state, there's four main things that you need. You need digital ID, you need AI, you need data centers, blockchain technology, and then also you can include digital asset into that. China is known as a surveillance state already. Vietnam is as well. All those things I just named are almost in Ohio. In Ohio, under Bill 78, because of that, we don't have a legalized digital ID yet in Ohio. Florida banned that. Governor DeSantis banned digital ID completely in Florida because of government overreach issues. So we need to make sure in Ohio that does not happen. But we do have an issue with surveillance state connecting to digital asset, because through the blockchain technology and also what's called smart contracts in the future, and you can go to the Blockchain Council, and, look this up yourself. It's all out there. But these smart contracts, along with, if there was a digital ID, a national digital ID, whatever it is being pushed upon us. The reason is because there's an alliance called the Digital Impact Alliance. And two of the main partners of that is the Gates Foundation and also the Rockefeller Foundation. Now, and of course, the UN developmental goals is a part of that. So by 2030, they want these things in place. The point I bring this up is because when you take a step back and you look at the broader picture of surveillance state, there's much more going on here. Last year at the U.S. Senate Committee on Judiciary, it was actually discovered that with the CCP, Communist Chinese Party, or Chinese Communist Party, that the Gates Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation, and the Ford Foundation were actually giving millions of dollars to the CCP. On top of that, we have Microsoft, which is Bill Gates, the Gates Foundation, and they're kind of like pushing this along in a big way. The reason being is because Bill Gates owns the most farmland in the entire nation as far as a private owner. Secondly, why is it that our hand has been forced, right, by China into this AI race? And then, but yet we got somebody that was handing the CCP money and funding their universities, that's a World Bank donor that's propping up the whole AI data center, one of the largest anyway, that's propping this up. And
It's
then
a good
you got
question. And
Bezos on
it's
top
a
of
good
it and
question, and
others.
it's a fair point about who's behind all of this. And yeah, there is an international aspect to all of this. Folks, we're pretty much out of time here. But just very briefly on what the mayor was saying a few moments ago about, people just don't want these things in their backyards. They don't want them in their communities. They don't want them next to their neighborhoods. They don't want all of the noise pollution that comes with it and so on and so forth. But here's our problem. If we don't put it in, suburban or urban areas, because we don't want it near neighborhoods, we got to put it in rural areas. Rural areas where the farmland is. We don't want to take away farmland either. They've got to go somewhere if they're going to exist at all. If they don't exist at all, obviously, then we run the risk of losing that race again internationally, because AI is here to stay, and I think that's one thing that everybody here agrees. But regulations are needed, and I'm going to ask each of you to take 30 seconds just to give a final statement here on this, if you would. I'm going to start with Tom because we started with him at the beginning here, but just take 30 seconds. I'm going to hold you to the 30 though, folks. I know it's real easy to go on with this, but try to stick to the 30 so that everybody can have their last word, because we're in a very, very difficult spot here. We know that something needs to happen. The question is how and when. Tom, you're 30.
Okay. Stay engaged as citizens. Go to the meetings. Have your trustees or your county commissioners or whoever the body is that's doing this give you answers. No NDAs, no backroom deals. Let's get the facts, make the data centers answer the environmental questions and everything else. And then finally, make sure, as Mike DeWine, I'm not a big fan of Mike DeWine, but he said, cut a good deal. Cut a good deal. And the property taxes are significant for lots of rural communities where the school districts are suffering and things. It can help us. So let's try to do them and do them right. And if we can't, then we're not going to do them.
Very well said. Thank you, sir. Stephanie Stock.
Okay, so all of the things that I mentioned that were concerns from the citizens, that's all being drafted in a piece of legislation. I hope that when we finally get a bill number, we may get it back today. We may have a bill number as soon as next week. I hope that we'll have the support of everybody on this podcast, because I think that if we pass legislation that gives citizens a vote, that require the EPA to monitor these chemicals, that require these facilities to have on-site water treatment so that we know they're putting the water back either the way they found it or cleaner than they found it, that we don't have the NDAs, and that they're paying their own way, and that they're operating off the grid, all the new developments, I think we're going to see a lot of this resistance fade back. So that's what I hope we can get support for, so that we don't have to try to move for the banning, because I think that's what will happen.
Thank you, Stephanie. Jeff Mihalik.
Hey, Bob, I just wanted to thank you and the panelists today. I think it was a good discussion. Just having the conversation gives everybody a little more information. And I think that's probably the biggest problem, the biggest resistance we have is just the unknown of what's going to happen. As long as we can handle the power and water issues and the zoning and community issues, I'm going to be for building these. If we can't handle those things, if our legislatures can't get on board with helping strengthen some of this, then, I'll probably move to the other camp, because, I want to protect my state as much as everybody else on the panel. So
thank you, Jeff. Mayor John Marra.
Yeah, well, again, thank you. It's a great conversation, great going back and forth. And, the thing is, I guess what I want to say is that, we had this select committee on data centers that they formed before they took a summer vacation here. And pretty much they did nothing. I mean, it's amazing how, you had the four top ones, Meta, Microsoft, and so forth. And they all got together and pretty much they teamed up and they says, oh, don't worry about any of the concerns you have about the water, about the noise pollution, about the power and all that. They pretty much gave an excuse for everything. But, what it comes down to is this. I mean, we need to be more prudent. Like I said before, the number one thing is we just don't want them in residential areas. Yes, we need them. But, it is a problem with the noise, the pollution that they put out. And again, it's just can be a health hazard. And again, that's what a lot of people aren't touching on.
Thank you, John. And Eric Watson.
Well, first and foremost, as a representative for the Maha Institute now, we need to make sure that we're listening to the constituents first. I know for national security reasons, we need the AI data centers. I don't dispute that. But on the other hand, are we going to turn everybody's world upside down and have a surveillance state system for individuals? Why? Most people, overwhelming majority, like cash. They like their privacy. And these are some of the biggest issues. And then we live in an agricultural state with farmland. An overwhelming majority of people in Ohio, super majority, do not want data centers in their communities or on their farmland or near their farmland. One of the biggest issues is because it's going to be detrimental to agriculture and also wildlife. So we need to make sure that we kind of figure this out. And if we feel that we're being pushed by big tech or corporations to do this, maybe we need to take a step back and look at what's really going on.
Thank you, Eric. And Greg Lawson.
Thank you very much. I appreciated everybody being on here. I think this was a great conversation. I do see that there's commonality here because everybody agrees we need them. There's questions about where do we put them. There's questions about what are the right regulatory processes and what's the right tax policy. And let me just say, the data center folks need to do a better job. They need to go into these communities and they need to start talking to folks, and they need to start discussing what they're going to do and have verifiable data about what they're going to do to protect the environment. They also shouldn't be taking a bunch of property tax abatements. I think that's a real challenge. We need to make sure the revenue is staying in the local communities where any of these might be being put. And we need to be very, very proactive on that. I wish the industry had been proactive in advance. I think the legislature has some ideas percolating around. We really need to work on the energy side of this and enhancing our grid, not just for data centers, but basically to build out the infrastructure that we need for energy across the board, because we're going to need it for manufacturing and advanced manufacturing and things like that we want to bring back into the United States too. And I think data centers can actually help do that if we have the right structure in place. So there's still more work to be done, but I think the key thing is let's keep having a dialogue. Let's keep having the conversation. And the key thing is we all know that they're needed, but how do we structure all of this? That's the key for the future. And we need to be talking to local officials, local residents, and the legislature needs to pay attention. And I envision that there will be some sort of a package at some point that gets put together. Stephanie's obviously going to have a bill coming out here soon. We'll be taking a look there. 646 had some provisions in there as it got modified. Maybe that's the thing. But, we need to be much more open across the board to make sure that people's concerns are heard.
Thanks, Greg. I have to say, everybody, I'm optimistic. I really am. I think there was a lot more common ground here amongst you than I thought there would be at the start of this. Not that everybody is, singing Kumbaya together, but I think there is some real room for, collaboration here. I think a lot of people on both sides say, if, then. On both sides, if we can do this and do that, if the communication can be lifted and elevated from the data centers to the community members and so forth, let the community members have a vote, as John was saying, and let everybody get involved in this. We know that these are going to be necessary. We know there's no turning back on, advancement and evolution, if you will, and technological evolution is as important as any other, especially in this world today. So it's a matter of how do we get it done the right way, giving the people a say with leaders who are willing to get out there and actually do it, as a couple of you were talking about. That's what this is all about. So thank you all very much for your time today and your participation in this. I hope people found it of value, and I appreciate you all very much.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you, Bob.
You got it. Thank you so much. All right. So I'm going to close it out here just by, again, kind of just a brief summary again. I liked so much of what I heard from both sides of this. I really do. I believe that what the folks on the pro advancement of data centers or the growth of data centers and the expansion of them, I believe they really do have the right idea. They want to do this right. They don't want to force this next to neighborhoods where people are going to have that noise pollution, potentially other types of harassment is the wrong word, but interruptions. How about that, of their daily lives? They don't want that. They want them to be done in the right places. They want them to be done with the right guardrails. And I think those that opposed it are saying, look, we're not just dead set against advancement either. We want it done, again, with the right guardrails as well. Stephanie Stock, I asked her to come on to be a part of this a few weeks ago, and she actually helped me put this thing together in terms of finding some folks, and she was going to be a proponent. She said, I could be on the proponent side or the opponent side, because what she wants is, I think a real good summary here, is what everybody else wants. They want their data centers, if they are going to be a part of the advancement of technology for the United States, so we don't get left behind in this battle with the rest of the world. She wants us to be on the front edge of that, but she just wants it to be done right. She wants to make sure that resources are not drained. She wants to make sure that natural resources and wildlife and other things are not negatively affected. That farmland isn't negatively affected. That's why she's writing a bill for it. So she could have been on either side. And I think I saw more heads nodding from the opposition side of the conversation while the opposition was speaking. So, which means there was so much more agreement here than I think people realized. And that's something that I found valuable in all of this, and I hope you guys did as well. All right, we're probably going to have to break that down quite a bit. And there's going to be a lot of videos to try to promote as much of this as possible. And I need you to share it. First, share the entire live stream today. Share the this episode. As always, give it thumbs up and give it a subscriber. Hit the subscriber button and so on and so forth. But most importantly, send this to people. Send this to your representatives in Columbus. Send this to your city council members, your local mayors like John Marra or Marra. Get this in front of people and let them know we want things done, but we want them done right. What is right by the community, what is right by, the farmers, what is right by, by the people. That's what this is all about. So I think there's some real room for growth here. So thank you to my participants. Thank you to everybody in the live chat. It was lively. I was watching it whenever I could. It was a lot of really great points made there. And thanks to you for always watching and being a part of this podcast. We're back tomorrow. Kirsten and I will be with us. We'll probably play some clips from today for those who may have missed it. But again, please make sure that a very small number of people missed this. It was valuable. Let's share it wide and far as we can. Thanks, everybody. Be well, be safe, and as always, try to stay free. That's our mission. We'll see you next time.